Spain and Portugal seeing power almost fully restored following a crippling blackout on the Iberian Peninsula. Schools and offices reopened in Spain and public transport resumed operations as well. A sudden power shutdown yesterday afternoon brought the country to a standstill, while Portugal said electricity is also back up. A preliminary assessment by Spain's grid operator has ruled out a cyber attack, but officials will still need to get to the bottom of what caused the widespread outage. For now, they say a sudden loss in power generation in southwestern Spain triggered dramatic instability in the system. And more, Ross Cullen joins us live from Paris. Ross, what more do we have on the update from Spain's power company on its assessment of what caused this massive outage?
Well, the King Felipe has been chairing a National Security Council meeting today in Spain, and also we've had another news conference from the Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, his third since this crisis began, and he's been giving more information about the current situation, about what they think could have caused this enormous outage on Monday. It's interesting to note some of the specificities of what Mr. Sánchez was talking about. He said the priority is to discover what happened in those 5 seconds. It cannot happen again. Now, that's important because it was around 12:30 p.m. local time on Monday when there was a 5-second outage of some 15 gigawatts. 60% of the electricity Spain was using at that time was cut for 5 seconds. So almost 2/3 of the electricity being used at 12:30 p.m. local time in hospitals, airports, the railway network, internet service providers, the school systems, sport, the banking sector, the retail sector, 60% of that was just lost. And then that had a knock-on effect that lasted many hours. So there's been this latest news conference from Mr. Sánchez, and he has been saying that they have ruled out a cyber attack, but they are not discounting the possibility of sabotage. There was also some thought it could have been a meteorological event, perhaps an atmospheric event that impacted the power generation. They are still looking into the reasons behind that, but we do know that this was an enormous outage that really impacted Spain and Portugal, because both those countries sharing the Iberian Peninsula are so highly interconnected when it comes to their electricity grids. And Spain's national electricity provider, Red Eléctrica, said it was exceptional and extraordinary.
It may be exceptional and extraordinary, but even so, the fact that Spain's Prime Minister stressed this cannot ever happen again, suggesting that if there are any vulnerabilities in Europe's energy sector, they will be trying to fix that. At this point, very early point in investigations, are there any potential vulnerabilities being identified?
Well, Mr. Sánchez said we are going to make changes. We'll have maximum transparency in this investigation, but I'm going to ask the European Union for help. He would like an independent investigation to be covered by Brussels. He would like an independent report to be released by Brussels. And we've had comments from European Union officials about the situation. We already heard from the European Commission Vice President for Clean Energy, Teresa Ribera, who is herself Spanish and who is herself a former member of Mr. Sanchez's political party. She was saying that this was one of the most serious episodes to be recorded in Europe in recent times. We've heard from Paula Pino. She's the European Commission spokesperson. She's been saying this was an event of unprecedented magnitude. So all of these superlatives to try to describe the tremendous impact of the outage on Monday. And interestingly, when it comes to further vulnerabilities, there was a simple statement released by the European spokesperson for preparedness, Eva Herenchirova, and she said that being prepared is better than being badly surprised.
All right, thanks. That Ross Cullen there reporting live from Paris. And for more analysis on this, we're joined by José Antonio Aguado Sánchez. He's a professor from the department head. He is department head of the Electrical Engineering Department at the University of Málaga. Thanks so much for joining us, Professor. And we just heard from our correspondent the superlatives, but the stress is the best way to manage this is to be prepared. It's always easy to look back and say one should have been more prepared, but given protocol, given existing policy, was Spain prepared for this extraordinary event?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, our power system is operate in a very secure mode. Actually, we configure our system with what we call N-1 configuration, which means that the system is fully ready to smoothly operate after the contingency of losing one big power plant, one big substation, or transmission line. However, the events that happened yesterday were very unlikely to happen. Let me go into more details here. So we know that at around 12:30, there was a contingency where we lose one power generation in the southwest, and the grid self-stabilized and recovered very quickly. However, 1.5 seconds later, a new contingency took place and a second power plant was out of service. And 3.5 seconds later, the interconnection between Spain and France was interrupted due to grid instability. So this sequence of events are very unlikely to happen, but it did happen. So the protocols...
pardon me for cutting in, Professor. So you're saying that each thing that happened was very unlikely, but the fact that they happened in sequence the way they did, you are looking at multiple contingencies which took the system off its even keel.
True, that's right. Multiple contingencies in a very short period of time and very intense. We were losing 60% of the available generation capacity in less than 5 seconds. So currently, it is very difficult to protect the system against those contingencies. However, after the forensic analysis about the system operators, we need to incorporate lessons learned to new operation security protocols, definitely.
Okay, so we've had the Spanish Prime Minister come out and very specifically say that the possibility that an excess of electricity generated by renewable sources, he has ruled out this as one of the causes for this massive outage. First, can he, in fact, at this point, say that without any qualification? Is there evidence for that? Can you have evidence for that? And if that is so, why is that so relevant in the current context in Spain?
Yeah, as for now, the available public data, we don't have enough evidence to give such information. And it will take weeks for system operator engineers to prepare a report on that. What we know is that at the time of the blackout, a massive renewable energy penetration was in the system, around beyond 70%, taking into account solar, photovoltaic, and wind. And definitely let me use a technicality here, the available inertia in the system, which is related to the rotation of synchronous machine in the system, were not too high compared to other days. However, it is too early to have any relevant confirmation of the renewable energy taking a major role in this blackout.
All right, leaving aside this specific incident, one of the concerns, Spain, like every country, we're facing global warming, so the need to tackle, to cut back on use or completely cut out the use of fossil fuels, hence the heavy reliance on renewables. So any policy going forward, Spain must provide electricity to the public while also moving ahead on renewables. The problem with renewables is that they might potentially upset the balance too much or too little. Does chaos, which we saw yesterday on the Iberian Peninsula, suggest that this might be a concern on policy on renewables going forward in Spain?
Yeah, it may have some consequences on policy, energy policy here. However, it is also important to emphasize that running the system with very high renewable energy penetration can be achieved from a secure point of view. So it is early to take any conclusion from the event from yesterday in Spain and Portugal. However, let me insist in this idea that the security protocols will be revisited after the analysis of this event.
All right. The stress, of course, is that, as you mentioned, this will be a forensic analysis going forward, and it will take a good deal of time and evidence before we can know categorically what caused those outages in both Spain and Portugal. Thanks to that, Professor José Antonio Aguado Sánchez, the department head of the Electrical Engineering Department at the University of Málaga.